Jetour arrived at the Beijing International Automotive Exhibition 2026 with a point to make. 3 vehicles, 3 distinct segments, and a collective message that this is a brand moving with intention rather than simply filling out a catalog. The T8 sat at the center of that presentation, a 3-row SUV aimed squarely at families who want genuine space, real technology, and enough capability to handle more than a supermarket car park. The T8 slots above the Jetour T2, stepping into mid to large SUV territory where the competition is serious and buyer expectations have grown considerably over the past few years. The proportions reflect where it's positioned. The wheelbase is noticeably longer than smaller stablemates. The stance is commanding, without tipping into aggression, and the overall presence on the road is the kind that a family of 5 with luggage, a dog, and a roof box actually needs. The design follows Jetour's current direction: bold front fascia, squared-off body lines, and an overall look that sits comfortably within global SUV styling conventions without being anonymous. Step inside and the shift is more noticeable. The cabin has been reworked with a premium feel that marks a genuine step up from what the brand has offered previously. 3 rows of seating accommodate 7 occupants in a configuration flexible enough to suit different usage scenarios, because the reality of family SUV ownership is that the car needs to be different things on different days. A 15.6-inch floating infotainment display dominates the dashboard in a way that's become expected in this segment, serving as the hub for connectivity, navigation, and vehicle settings. The screen size alone doesn't make an interior feel premium, but the overall layout and material choices suggest Jetour has put real thought into what the cabin experience should feel like, not just what it should look like in a spec sheet. The Powertrain is a 2.0-liter turbocharged engine, integrated with an updated hybrid system producing around 254 horsepower. That's a sensible number for a vehicle of this size, enough to move it confidently on the highway with a full complement of passengers and luggage. And the hybrid architecture helps where it matters most, which is in the kind of urban stop-and-go driving that punishes fuel consumption in larger combustion-only vehicles. Jetour isn't abandoning conventional engines here, but the hybrid integration signals clearly that electrification is part of the brand's direction rather than something being explored at the margins. The off-road hardware is worth taking seriously rather than dismissing as marketing decoration. 3 locking differentials and intelligent weighting sensors, built on Jetour's Gaia architecture, are the kind of specifications that indicate genuine engineering investment in terrain capability rather than a badge and a revised ride height. Whether the majority of T8 buyers will ever use those differentials is almost beside the point. There's a meaningful segment of buyers, particularly in markets like the Middle East, who factor proven off-road capability into purchase decisions for family SUVs, even when their daily reality is urban. Having the hardware actually present rather than implied matters to those buyers. The T8 didn't arrive at Beijing alone. Jetour brought 2 other vehicles that together paint a fairly clear picture of where the brand is heading. The F700 pickup carries a plug-in hybrid system, producing 892 horsepower and 1,135 Nm of torque. Numbers that belong more naturally in a performance conversation than a utility one, and a 6x6 concept variant that exists primarily to demonstrate ambition and generate attention. Both of those things are legitimate goals for a brand that's building international recognition. The TX rounds out the trio as a fully electric off-road model on an 800 voltage platform, representing Jetour's first proper step into dedicated EV territory. 3 vehicles, 3 different buyer profiles, and a consistent message that the brand has range and intent. The international dimension of all this matters more than it might seem for a Chinese manufacturer whose name isn't yet universally recognized outside its home market. Jetour has accumulated over 2.27 million cumulative sales across more than 100 countries and regions, which is a figure that would have seemed improbable a decade ago, and speaks to the pace at which Chinese automotive brands have built genuine global presence. The target of 2 million annual sales by 2030, with half of those coming from overseas markets, is ambitious, but it's the kind of ambition that's increasingly being backed by product that can actually compete, rather than purely by price. The T8 specifications map closely onto what sells in several of Jetour's priority international markets. The Middle East in particular has strong demand for large SUVs with credible long-distance comfort, spacious interiors, and the kind of road presence that communicates value. The hybrid efficiency story travels well in markets where fuel costs and emissions awareness are increasingly shaping purchase decisions. And 3 rows of seating for 7 passengers is practically a prerequisite, rather than a selling point, in markets where multi-generational family travel is the norm rather than the exception. The T8 reads like a vehicle that was developed with those markets genuinely in mind, rather than adapted for them after the fact. Pricing and full market specifications haven't been confirmed yet, and production readiness is expected sometime later in 2026, with commercial launch details to follow. That timing is fairly standard for a Beijing show reveal, and the additional information will fill in important gaps around trim levels, regional availability, and what the value proposition actually looks like when placed against established rivals. What the T8 communicates at this stage is something that numbers alone don't fully capture. There's a maturity to the product that reflects a brand making deliberate choices rather than reactive ones. Larger footprint, more considered interior, electrified but not dogmatically so, genuinely capable off-road without pretending that capability is the whole story. It's a vehicle designed for the reality of how families actually use large SUVs, which sounds obvious, but is harder to execute well than it appears. Jetour is building towards something with this lineup, and the T8 is a significant piece of that. The question of whether the brand's international ambitions translate into the kind of sustained sales growth that 2030 targets require will be answered over the next several years. But the product direction shown at Beijing suggests the brand is approaching that challenge with the right priorities, and the T8 in particular is a vehicle that will be worth watching as it moves from show stand to showroom.